All right. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's always an honor to be able to interview Robert. We share a very similar view of the outlook on commodities, and I want to just start with the observation that the world's in the midst of a energy transition reset. That we're going to rewrite the rules over the next 12 months, and I really want to focus on really three areas. One is on the financing of commodity and energy-related projects. The second is on the regulatory backdrop, which also is going to change. And then the third are on the economic incentives. And Robert, both you and I have been somewhat critical of the previous approach to this, and I think one that I've always agreed with you tremendously on is that NPV approach to financing. And energy transition in particular is very, very long dated, whether if it's in mines or big infrastructure projects, and then the regulatory backdrop making it even that much more difficult for your mines that are like 26 years in the making. But I just want to start with, here's your chance to give advice to the world as we rewrite the rules. How should we be thinking about it?
Last time I was in this room, we were talking about Chile versus Congo. And the press got very snarky because I said I'd much rather mine copper in the Congo than in Chile. Now it's obvious that we were right. Chile is the second largest producer, and the greenest copper in the world is not in Chile, it's actually in the Congo. And almost everything we're reading, almost everything we're seeing is disinformation. So maybe we should start by the disaster that El Miliband is going to do to this little island country. There is no chance the Labor Party is going to have an energy transition in 5 years here. It's just, and you're going to bankrupt the country trying with a lot of crazy ideas. So mining is not a business for intelligent people. And there's a huge amount of disinformation there. And there's no point in telling you anything other than controversial and truthful answers to a bunch of bizarre questions. The situation is hopeless, but it's not serious. The world is at war today. We're actually at war. And you have to talk about energy transition if you even can conceive of what that means in the context that we have now are officially at war. In Russia, they're showing pictures of London being incinerated on television. They're just showing it. So the whole concept of where does mining fit in? What are we mining? Why are we mining it? How are we mining it? Military demand is so much superior and demanding and NPV insensitive for metals. So first, you have to know we need metals to survive. And then we can talk about this so-called energy transition. Because so far, we've made zero progress on energy transition. Aren't we burning more crude oil today than at any moment?
And coal, by the way.
And coal.
I want to go to your point about the need for metals. Didn't the Chinese just ban germanium and a bunch of other critical minerals this morning from being exported to the West?
This is part of the war. President Biden said to Xi Jinping, look, buddy, we won't sell you any NVIDIA chips, and you're just not going to get access to those chips for machine learning or AI, depending upon what term you want to use. And he waited about a month, but today he really formalized it and said, I won't sell you any gallium or germanium with which you need to make those chips. And so this incredible balkanization of the world economy is landing right here. And if you don't understand the concept of what's actually happening, your idiotic politicians are going to destroy this country. I mean, this island is going to be impoverished incredibly in the next 5 years if they embark on stupid ideas that don't work. So your entire automobile industry is going to leave Great Britain because the energy price is too high. You already have the highest energy prices anywhere around and skyrocketing. So what does it mean, energy transition? If you put 100 plasma physicists in a room and you ask them to define the word energy, the first of those two words, they can't even define that term. What is energy? How do you define it? And transition to what? So I think a rational definition of the word energy is electricity to be used for a useful purpose. How we generate electrical energy, how do we make it, how do we transmit it, how do we use it, as opposed to coal or hydrocarbon, apparently, which create anthropomorphic global warming. But, when we get to war, if I'm going to shoot you in the head, you don't have time to do a net present value model. You either have copper to shoot a bullet back or you're just dead. And so we have a mining industry that's funded with net present value models, which are created by complete idiots and for complete idiots. China never paid any attention to net present value models. They just paid more. And now China controls the supply chain for almost everything useful. And politicians...
On that point, you look at China, they produce, capacity of, 30 million units of EVs. They dominate battery markets at 70 to 80%. Solar, is there a hope?
Solar, wind, cars, you name it, China will just kill you. Like you haven't got a prayer of competing with Chinese electrical cars. No hope. It's hopeless. Like all car production is going to leave. And at the same time, the government here says you have to buy an electric car. So you're all going to be driving Chinese cars. When I was a kid, we had the first Japanese car. It was like the Datsuns and the Nissans. They were kind of a joke. And they got really good. Toyota took over the world. And then we started seeing the first Korean cars. And now Hyundai is the world's largest automobile group. Here come the Chinese cars are fantastic. I mean, they're so much better than a Tesla. I've gone and toured all of these guys like Xiaopeng and Li Motors. I mean, they're incredible cars. I got in a big SUV, and the Chinese salesman said, just go inside and ask it to play any piece of music. And there's a big high-resolution screen about that wide, and I got in and said in English, Hotel California, and boom, like 28 speakers, Hotel California, in a nanosecond in this Chinese car, and it'll play anything for you. It's incredible. And cheap, inexpensive.
Well, cheap without Trump putting big tariffs on them. What is Trump going to do to the outlook?
We're balkanizing the world economy, and this is going to be insanely inflationary. The value of your money will be destroyed. Everything will look the same here in 5 years. You'll drive around London, everything will look the same, but your currency will be much weaker, and the population will be a lot poorer because you have idiotic government. They haven't got a clue of what's going on. They just literally haven't got a clue. This guy, Ed Miliband, what an idiot. Jesus. I mean, really, there's no understanding of the supply chain whatsoever. None. Zero. People actually, I've said this for 20 years, people think a ham sandwich comes from a refrigerator. They never picture all those pigs slaughtered in a river of blood outside Chicago, literally trainloads of offal from the dead pigs. So how can you have an energy transition if you don't understand what's turning these lights on? If you've ever been guilty of turning on a light when you enter a room, somewhere a generator had to kick in and send you electrical energy from somewhere.
So, on that point, electrifying the world, which is critical to the outlook for copper demand, some are worried that Trump's aggressive embracement of energy dominance through hydrocarbons in the U.S. is going to derail the electrification. Do you see any truth to that?
Oh, these are all silly ideas. I mean, he's got Elon Musk anyway. He's got him hypnotized. So there's just no violating the laws of physics. We have 7 or 8 billion people on this planet. There's probably close to 1 billion people for whom an energy transition is just to have an electric light bulb or to stop burning wood. And all of the sources of energy we've ever created as a species have been accretive. As we walked in the room today, we're still burning 103 million barrels of crude oil a day. We've spent 10 trillion on energy transition, and we haven't been able to materially reduce the amount of energy produced by oil or coal whatsoever. In fact, if anybody was honest, they'd say it's been a complete and utter failure. Now, we can develop solar power and wind power and hydropower, geothermal power. There's all kinds of things we can do, but the metal demand to do that is so far beyond your wildest imagination. Somebody has to just ground people in the fundamentals of the supply chain and what we actually face as a species to get there from here. We can make progress, but we have to be realistic about it.
Well, I 100% agree with your view that we have inadequate resources to meet that demand. So why are copper prices struggling at $9,000 a ton this morning, and the metals and actually the entire complex under significant weight right now?
Copper's up as I walked in the room this morning, but not that that matters. We're perfectly happy with the current price of copper at $4 a pound. We mine it at 70 cents a pound in the Congo cash cost, and that's about another 60 cents to truck it to the ocean. When the railroad gets started there, it'll drop to about $1 a pound. It's better for us to keep the copper price down at $4. Do you have any idea how much copper we need for our kids and our grandkids to live in a decent world? Where's this metal going to come from? How? So you don't really want it at $10,000 a pound, because then any dream of an energy transition is long gone. I mean, you only have gold and silver that conduct electrical energy better than copper. There just isn't enough of them for the purpose. And there's some limited substitution for aluminum, but it burns. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work well in tall buildings. And so you just can't engineer your way around copper metal for energy creation or transmission. And so, we have a very dirty job to do here. We have to find it and mine it en masse in a much cleaner and more sustainable way. And that's doable.
Yeah. I agree. I agree with your outlook on the energy transition. What about Chinese property? The bears are all focused on Chinese property, going to continue to take down the complex. Do you see any truth to that?
No, I've been in China recently. I mean, it's just the closer you get to London or New York, people make all kinds of crazy remarks about China. And when you get to China, people make all kinds of crazy remarks about the United States. We've lost the ability to understand each other. The Chinese equity market is actually very attractive right now. Probably the biggest money will be made in buying Chinese equities in the near term. It's sold down. It's out of sellers. And the New York Stock Exchange and American Western equity markets are at an all-time high. So anybody knows that financial markets conspire to fool the largest number of participants.
By the way, on that, I got a great stat for you. So you look over the last 10 years, Chinese equity market's only up 30% over that 10 years. U.S. is up 350%. The market cap ratio of the two is identically the same today as it was 10 years ago. Why? Because there's so much more shares issued, and the shares in the U.S. shrank. So I 100% agree with that view, and that what that's telling is there's so much equity capital sitting in China that's ready to blossom over the course of the next decade. But yeah, I was shocked to see how many shares, the market cap's unchanged over that time period.
Anyway, we could talk about China for months, but basically the Chinese have been tapping on the brakes. They knew what they were doing was unsustainable, and so they're letting the system wring itself out to improve sustainability. But the unfunded pension liabilities in the United States and the amount of debt created, I mean, Donald Trump has now said Bitcoin is a good thing, and so that sounds like the destruction of the US dollar if you allow people to just print money out of thin air as a competing fiat currency. And so a lot of people are nervous about putting their savings in a particular currency. The dollar is very strong right now. Everybody's playing the Trump trade. You might want to consider the opposite, right?
I actually like to point out there's no de-dollarization going on in the world. There's only de-euroization going on in the world right now. We're getting tight on time, but I got to ask you the big question.
We're very cranky here.
Yes, which is actually, I have one last, and then I'll turn it up to the rest of the audience. Supply. Where are we going to get the supply to meet all of this demand for electrification?
We need a fundamental step change in technology in order to mine metals that we need for 7 or 8 billion people. You've got 1.4 billion people on the African continent, roughly equal to China. India's got 1.5 billion. They're still making babies there. The Islamic world, 2 billion people, still making babies. Everybody wants everything. And to do that in a sustainable way is extremely metals intensive. And we need a better way, a greener way, a fundamentally different way, not only to mine those metals, but the way we generate and use electrical energy. Without that, as a species, it's game over, you know. And so this is a very serious discussion. But you can't have a politician bribe you with your own money and tell you they're going to give you a magic energy transition in Great Britain in the next 5 years. That's just insanity. There's no chance of that. That just can't possibly happen. We don't have enough copper to do it. We just don't have the metals to do it. And so the mining industry has this huge burden of figuring out a better way to mine much, much larger volumes of greener mining. And I'm an optimist. I think it's possible, and we'll be talking about that in the near future.
I'm sure we will. Well, we're at the 5-minute mark. I know some of you had some questions.
Yeah, that's more fun.
Yeah.
Somebody ask a question.
Yeah. Okay. If you just go yourself first, Jamie.
Robert, great interview. Jamie Strauss from Digby. Back in the 1990s, the mining industry was trading on double-digit EBITDA multiples. Sentiment, I think, got taken out on 3.8 times. What's the silver bullet to turn around the disinvestment in this sector?
Maybe a crisis will focus people's consciousness. Maybe, a crisis. The problem is the crisis has already arrived. We have about half of humanity that is educated, interested in trying to do something about anthropomorphic global warming. And we can't afford to take a risk on that subject. We had about 640 water tornadoes in the Mediterranean Sea last summer. One of them knocked over a sailboat and killed a financier. But it's the hottest water we've ever had measured in the Mediterranean since human beings were walking on 2 feet. On the other hand, we have war and drone warfare, artificial intelligence, data centers are all linked for military application, and their demand for copper competes with the copper we need for the energy transition, like building an electric car or a microwave oven or a washing machine. And so we're really scared when we look at the dynamics here. And we think we're heading for a train wreck where you can have all kinds of crazy ideas, but then physics ultimately comes and wakes you up in a rude shock. And so real things are going to appreciate dramatically against paper currencies. And you can't eat bitcoins, guys. Like if an EMP weapon comes over London and puts down a big electromagnetic burst, the internet's wiped out forever, and you can't do anything with your bitcoins. They're gone. At least if you bury a gold coin somewhere under a tree, if you survive, you could probably dig it up and hope the guy doesn't kill you for the coin. But how we actually take care of our kids and our grandkids requires a much more realistic discussion of how we revolutionize the supply chain. And mining is sort of a 600-year-old enterprise. We still crush rock with compressive force. It takes a huge amount of energy to bash rock together and get the metal out of it. That has to change. Everything has to change. And we're working on it. We're working on it. It's possible. But the situation is hopeless, but it's not serious. We have a chance. If you think about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, when those walls are squeezing in and that great big ball is coming down to crush you and he's got to dive under that door that's coming down to close, that's the situation we face right now. If we go to war with China, if we go to war with a combined China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, at the same time we're trying to do an energy transition, that won't work well for anybody on this planet. And if we think we're going to beat the Chinese at electrical cars, electrification, we're crazy. They do windmills and solar and electric cars at scale, and Great Britain is ludicrous at trying to catch up at doing that. It's just not going to happen. You saw this Northvolt try to build batteries, and $20 billion is just going to money heaven. So we're just unbelievably far behind the Chinese at certain energy transition technologies. And we need to have a much more serious dialogue that takes more than 20 minutes. So since we're cranky and jet-lagged, please forgive this bizarre rap, but there is a huge amount of humanity that will be dependent on a revolution in mining. Mining's role in all this, whether you're looking at the military side or whether you're looking at the attempt to change the way we generate electrical energy and transmit it on this planet, it's totally dependent on the mining industry. And at least real things are coming back in style. And I wouldn't be long the British pound with this current government, because it really is not going to end well. I've been looking at their plans, and they really haven't got a clue what they're talking about. So somebody should say it. They literally don't have a clue.
Great. Well,
Okay.
thank you, Robert.
Yeah,
Much
thank you.
appreciated.
Yep. Peace.